163 Radnor Street, Manchester doesn't exist anymore, and these two horses certainly don't answer to the names of Lily and Olga Barton. And if Harry Porter is alive and well, he's not in this Balham funeral parlor. In Cecil Street, Manchester, there's just a gap in the wall where the Angoys and Barkers should be. A couple of peculiar coincidences surround the Barkers, the Angoys, the Bartons, and Mr. Harry Porter. First, they're all registered to vote in a general election next Monday. And second, none of them seem to exist. Tonight, Weldon Action sets out on the trail of the vanishing voters. The Barkers, the Angoys, the Bartons, and Mr. Harry Porter are apparently fictitious characters in a bizarre exercise which could affect the outcome of a South American election. The former British colony of Guyana is perched on the shoulder of South America. Next Monday, it holds its first independent election, an election of international importance. The strong opposition is led by a Marxist, and if he won, America could have another Cuba on her doorstep.
Right. Enemy! Right!
Guyana has a bitter past. Nearly 200 people died in a violent struggle between the parties before independence. There are two main racial groups. Guyanese of African origin are concentrated in the towns and dominate the police, army, and civil service. Most of them will vote for the existing, largely Negro government. But the majority of Guyanese are of Indian origin. Their ancestors were shipped from India to labor in the sugar fields. They're likely to vote massively for the opposition and its Indian Marxist leader. To win, the government needs every vote it can lay its hands on, and it's taking no chances. 1,000 troops patrolled the plantations when Indian sugar workers went on strike last month. All the old bitterness between Indian and Negro, between left and right, still simmers. But we did find one floating voter in the cane fields.
So who are you going to vote for in this election?
Well, as for now, I can't say yet. Because I did not consider my mind yet who I'm going to vote for. But later on, then I'll see whoever my mind choose to vote for.
Forbes Burnham has been Prime Minister of Guyana since 1964. He leads the ruling People's National Congress Party.
No, you can't vote PPP because you can't vote for terrorism that I talked about yesterday. You can't vote for UF because there's a little boy in a big bar race. And it's class march running in a class race. Therefore, you got to vote for the People's National Congress. Thank you, comrade. I really got to vote now. I have to go left.
Don't go now. Udo, I hope the price you sober. What I got to go up this year.
But the receptions are less enthusiastic when the Prime Minister is not among his own people.
Now, one last strike. Hip, hip, hip. All right, you'll find your best. And therefore, you will get the holiday tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Marxist Chetty Jagan leads the People's Progressive Party. He was once premier, but agents of the American CIA secretly financed a general strike to bring him down.
Comrades, this is no time for us to be divided. Guyana, unfortunately, has too many races and too many religions, which is a hunting ground for the sharks. But there are only two classes: the exploiters and the exploited, the capitalists and the workers.
Big businessman Peter Dagar is leader of the third party, the right-wing United Force. 2 months ago, he broke his party's coalition with Burnham. Now, he campaigns among the Amerindians of the interior.
This time, I would not join any coalition except on these terms, and these terms are that the land question be settled before, that the rights of the Amerindians to their lands be granted.
I think communism can be defeated fairly in Guyana, as it has been in the past, and I'm all for a fair, honest election, and we're not getting it, and it augurs very ill for the future. I think we had a bill called a Representation of the People's Bill, which had better been called a bill to rig the elections in favor of the ruling party.
Georgetown, capital of Guyana. This is the center where the government compiled the disputed registers of voters. 300,000 people in Guyana have now been photographed, registered, and deemed eligible to vote by this office. And despite opposition protests, the office has also registered 67,000 voters outside Guyana for the first time. These overseas voters don't have to be photographed. They make up no less than 1/6 of the total electorate. The office staff are overwhelmingly drawn from the pro-government Negro bloc. We asked Chief Elections Officer Reg Butler why.
It is a normal thing. It happened with the last government when they were preparing the registers. They have to see to that they put the persons in to look after their own interests. I mean, they wouldn't like to know that they put in anybody who would embarrass them in any way. But this is a normal thing, that they do appoint persons who they can trust and can carry out their functions.
Lancelot Ferera is Commissioner of Registration. His office approved the overseas list.
Well, how many did you find about in London?
About 38,000.
And outside London?
By the remaining 7,000.
Weldon Action did its own arithmetic.
Mr. Ferrera's final lists name 43,423 Guyanese voters in Britain. We checked British census and immigration statistics, but could not find many more than 20,000. There are certainly not 43,423 Guyanese voters.
I asked to see a number registration cards of cases which looked odd to me in looking over the revised voters list for overseas. And in examining the cards that I asked for, it was very clear. There was no doubt that these were forged cards.
Janet Jagan is the wife of the opposition leader Chetty Jagan and secretary of his party.
A William Hockley and a Florence Hockley living at one address, and then a William Hockley and a Florence Hockley at another address, all four having separate registration numbers and each entitled to a ballot. I found that all four, when you examine them together, bore similar signatures. So, in fact, the four were manufactured.
Back in London, we checked both the Hockley addresses listed.
No, never heard of William Hockley or Florence Hockley. My family's lived here for 15 years. No.
They don't live here?
No.
How long have you been living here?
About a year and 6 months.
About a year and 6 months? Uh-huh. Okay.
What's her name?
What's your name?
Mrs. Backus.
Mrs. Backus. I see. You're quite sure they don't live here? Do you know of anyone of that name living near here?
No.
They don't live next door?
Intrigued by the inconsistencies in the overseas voting list, Weldon Action set out to test its accuracy.
24 researchers checked a random sample of 550 listed addresses of voters in London. The result was startling.
No.
How long have you lived here yourself?
Over 25 years.
No, we haven't got any Mr. Dalton here. Never. Never heard of him.
How long have you been here?
I live here 10 years now.
Are you absolutely sure that the number of Guyanese living in Great Britain is correct? The figure you have given is correct?
I feel the figure is correct.
You're 100% sure about this?
Well, I feel it's correct because there are quite a lot of Guyanese who are living here from very long way back.
No, Mr. John Collins has never lived here. I've lived here for 30 years. I've never heard of him.
No, not as far as I know. Because we've lived here 9 years and nobody by that name has ever lived here.
But you still are 100% sure that the figures on the foreign lists are correct?
Yes.
You have no doubt at all?
I have no doubt at all.
I see.
I've got on my list a Barbara Curtis, who gives this address as her address.
I've never heard of a woman of that name.
How long have you been here?
About 15 years.
Anyone live upstairs?
No, nobody.
James Battery?
Bentley.
No, I never heard of him.
I see. How long have you been living here?
15 years now.
Are you sure? James Bentley?
Don't know the name at all.
I see.
I've got a fellow here from Ceylon. Do you think that any of your agents registered anyone at all without their actually producing a passport?
I cannot say that for certain because I'm not living abroad, but I will feel that they will carry the instructions as I given them in the correct manner.
In fact, nearly half the 550 addresses we visited had never heard of the Guyanese voters who should have been there. And our researchers found even more extraordinary examples.
In London's East End, voters Yearwood, Howard and Ned should have been living at 16, 20 and 22 Rendlesham Road. Demolition began here a year ago and a school is being built on the site. 14 Homer Road, 15 and 16. More voters should live here, but the 3 houses were council padlocked 2 years ago. Examples like this cropped up all over London. Using the A to Z street guide, we set off for South London to find 15 Vant Road, Tooting. We found numbers 19 and 17, but there was an old established builder's yard where number 15 and Miss Gladys Cooper should have been.
We checked the correctness of the addresses to ensure that if an address is being given, it actually exists. That's the reason for checking the A to Z. If someone says that where he resides at a particular lot, in a particular street, particular address, we check the address to ensure that exists.
Are you sure that all the addresses exist?
Well, I actually didn't do the checking myself, but my staff did it. And I have confidence in them. I feel that they've done a good job.
And it is also unlikely that Gladys Foster ever lived at 32 Arvin Road, Islington. The houses here made way for the railway in 1874.
You feel there are absolutely no flaws?
Where I'm concerned, there's none. There are no flaws at all. Because everything is done in accordance with the regulations, or in accordance with an act, or legislation, which was passed by the House of Assembly, with both sides present. And so long as it is passed, I'm just merely carrying out the functions or the requirements of that particular legislation, which was discussed by the government.
The conclusions of our London survey were emphatic.
Most of the overseas voters on the Guyanese electoral list were not at the addresses given. 75 of the houses were derelict or non-existent. In fact, of the 550 names we checked in London, little more than 100 were genuine Guyanese voters. For conclusive proof, we sent out researchers in Manchester. They soon found the proof we needed.
Cecil Street, Manchester. Here, there should be 60 Guyanese voters. We looked very hard, but we couldn't find a single one. And where Radnor Street, Pindar Street, and 30 Guyanese were supposed to be, only a pub survived the bulldozers.
In Manchester, we checked 350 addresses, one house in every 6 listed. 50%, a full half of these houses didn't even exist. We found only one genuine voter for every 20 listed. Our total survey in London and Manchester proves beyond doubt that the list of overseas voters in the Guyana election is a massive fabrication.
When the British left Guyana in 1966, a special election commission was set up to supervise voting and guard against corruption. But in recent months, the Burnham government has whittled away the commission's power. Although the 3 major parties each appoint a member, the chairman also has a vote, and the election commission is now deadlocked. The chairman, Sir Donald Jackson, is a former High Court judge.
It is not for me to inquire, and in point of fact, I do not go about looking for faults. I try to find out the best in everyone so that I may improve my own imperfections. Well, I would start out by presuming that they are correct. And if information comes to me, which I am sure about, that there is something wrong, and it has been proved to me, then I will say, oh, I'm so very sorry that this is so. I never expected this. But I don't start out by presuming that a person would perform his act without impartiality or without good judgment. I don't assume that at all. Otherwise, one would get to wrong conclusions.
With this government, the poor class of people get poorer, and the rich class of people get richer.
In the rice fields around Georgetown, the Indian peasants are frustrated and angry.
Hard look, very hard. Look, all these walking in the mud, and we haven't seen anything at all. Some of us hardly getting food. A lot of people suffering bad. Walking from 7 to 7 in the mud, day and night.
In the peasant villages, Cherry Jagan's orators are whipping up indignation.
That insofar as